Do you know the most dangerous thing a 78-year-old woman can do? Trust no one. While my daughter and son-in-law were planning to put me in a cheap nursing home, there was something they didn't know. I was the secret owner of the state's wealthiest real estate empire. My name is Eleanor Thompson. Most people see me as just another gray-haired old lady with arthritis who shops with coupons and wears the same cardigan for years. That's exactly what I wanted them to see. For decades, I've cultivated this image carefully. I wear sensible shoes from the discount store. I clip coupons from the Sunday paper. I fuss over the thermostat to save a few dollars on heating. I wasn't always wealthy. I grew up during hard times in a small town in Ohio. My father worked 3 jobs, at the mine during the day, as a janitor in the evenings, and repairing shoes on weekends. My mother sewed our clothes from feed sacks and hand-me-downs. We knew the value of every penny because each one was earned with sweat and sacrifice. The Depression cast a long shadow over my childhood. I remember standing in bread lines with my mother, her dignity wrapped around her like armor as she accepted what was needed to keep us fed. "There's no shame in being poor, Eleanor," she would tell me. "The only shame is in wasting what you have, no matter how little." When I met Howard Thompson in 1963, I was working as a bookkeeper at a small manufacturing plant, taking night classes in business administration. Howard was different from other men I'd known. He didn't laugh when I talked about investments and property values. Instead, he asked questions, valued my opinions. We married in 1965 with nothing but dreams and determination. Howard was brilliant with numbers and investments. I had a sharp eye for property values, an intuition about which neighborhoods would grow, which buildings had potential beyond their current state. Together, we built our fortunes slowly, carefully, property by property. We agreed early on to live modestly and reinvest everything. "Wealth that shows is wealth that goes," Howard always said. It became our mantra, our business philosophy. While other successful couples bought bigger houses and flashier cars, we stayed in our starter home, driving used vehicles, living well below our means. When Howard died 15 years ago, I was devastated. We'd been partners in every sense, in business, in life, in dreams. The day after her funeral, several business associates approached me with offers to buy our holdings, assuming I wouldn't want to burden myself with such complex business matters. I smiled politely and declined. Then I went home, grieved privately, and continued running our business exactly as we had always had, quietly, efficiently, and without drawing attention to myself. I continued living in our modest 3-bedroom house. I drove the same car, shopped at the same stores, and never changed my lifestyle. My daughter, Christine, knew we were comfortable, but had no idea about the full extent of our assets. That was deliberate. Howard and I had discussed it many times. We didn't want her growing up with the burden of extreme wealth. We wanted her to find her own path, develop her own strengths. I watched Christine marry Michael 12 years ago. Michael was handsome in a conventional way, with a sales director position at a pharmaceutical company and a smooth charm that never quite reached his eyes. I never trusted him. There was something calculating behind his charming smile. He always asked too many questions about Howard's old business dealings, our properties, our investments. I kept my answers vague. Last month, I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I was napping on the porch. Michael's voice was clear through the window. "Your mother's getting worse, Christine. She forgot to turn off the stove again yesterday. It's time to look at Oak Meadows." Oak Meadows, the cheapest nursing home in the county, the place where people go to be forgotten. Christine sounded hesitant. I don't know, Michael. She's still pretty independent. We can't wait for something bad to happen, he insisted. Besides, once we sell her house, we can finally renovate our kitchen and take that vacation to Europe. She doesn't need the money anymore. My hands gripped my walking cane so tight my knuckles turned white. They were planning to put me away and spend my money before I was even gone. That night, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my attorney, Robert Blackwell. It was time to remind my family exactly who they were dealing with. What Michael and Christine didn't realize was that their comfortable life was about to change dramatically. Because when you underestimate an old woman with resources, you've made the biggest mistake of your life.
The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea and waiting. My old rotary phone still worked perfectly, another one of my old-fashioned quirks that made Michael roll his eyes. At exactly 9:30 a.m., it rang. "Everything's arranged, Eleanor," Robert said, his voice crisp and professional as always. "The meeting is set for Friday at 2 p.m. All parties will be present." "Anyone give you trouble about the short notice?" I asked, stirring honey into my tea. "Not at all. When Eleanor Thompson requests a meeting, people make time," he chuckled. "Most of them haven't seen you in person for years. They're curious. Let them be curious. Did you prepare the documents we discussed?" "All ready. The trust amendments, the new power of attorney forms, everything. I've also pulled the financial summaries you requested. Impressive growth these past 5 years." "Thank you, Robert. You're the only one I trust with this." After hanging up, I opened my worn address book and made 3 more calls. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a taxi to the city center, to a nondescript office building that housed Thornfield Investments. The security guard in the lobby, a young man named Derek who didn't recognize me, asked for identification. I handed him my driver's license, enjoying the confusion on his face as he connected the name on the ID with the name on the building directory. "Mrs. Thompson? The Mrs. Thompson?" he stammered. "The very same," I replied with a smile. The receptionist's eyes widened when I walked in. "Mrs. Thompson, we weren't expecting you in person." "Some matters require a personal touch, dear," I replied, looking around at the office I'd helped design but rarely visited. James Thornfield had been our operations manager for 20 years. He was in his late 50s now, trusted completely, one of the few people who knew the full extent of our holdings. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, hurrying out of his office to greet me, "this is an unexpected pleasure." He guided me into his office, closing the door behind us. "Is everything all right?" "Not exactly, James. I need a complete accounting of all assets, current market values, everything, and I need it quickly." His expression grew serious. "May I ask why?" "It's time to restructure things. Family matters." I didn't elaborate, and he didn't push. That was one of the things I valued about James. He understood discretion. 2 hours later, I left with a leather portfolio containing documents that would change everything. The true extent of Thompson Holdings laid out in spreadsheets and legal language, commercial properties across 5 states, residential developments, office buildings, the shopping mall on the north side of town, shares in 3 banks, and a technology company Howard had believed in before anyone had heard of the internet. On my way home, I stopped at the bank where I accessed a safe deposit box I hadn't opened in 12 years. Inside were the original documents from our first business deals, Howard's handwritten business plan, and a letter he'd written to me before his death to be read when you need to make a big decision without me. His words were like hearing his voice again. "Ellie, if you're reading this, you're facing something important alone. Remember what we built and why we built it. Not for ourselves, not for status, but for purpose. Money is just a tool, Use it wisely. I trust your judgment completely. You were always the braver one." When Christine dropped by that evening to check on me, I was back in my rocking chair with my knitting, the picture of a harmless, elderly woman. "Mom, you look tired," she said, frowning as she set her purse down. "Have you been overdoing it?" "Just a busy day, dear. How are you? How's Michael?" "He's good. Working late tonight." She fidgeted with her wedding ring, a tell she'd had since childhood when she was nervous about something. "Mom, Michael and I wanted to talk to you about something important." "Oh, what's that, dear?" I continued knitting, the click of the needles steady and rhythmic. "We've been thinking it might be better if you had some help, more support." I set my knitting down. "You mean a nursing home?" She flinched. "It's a retirement community, Mom. Oak Meadows has activities, people your age." "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And when did you and Michael decide this?" "It's not decided," she backpedaled, "but we've scheduled a tour for Friday at 2 p.m. "What a coincidence! I have a meeting scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. as well, at Robert Blackwell's office. I'd like you and Michael to be there." "Robert Blackwell? Dad's old attorney? Why would we—" "It's about my estate, Christine. It's time we discussed what will happen to everything when I'm gone." The change in her expression was subtle. A flicker of calculation replaced her concern. "Of course, Mom. We'll be there." After she left, I returned to my knitting, but my mind was racing. They thought Friday's meeting was about inheritance. They had no idea it was actually about consequences. What they didn't know was that the modest house they were so eager to sell was the least of my assets. And on Friday, they would discover just how badly they had underestimated the helpless old woman they were trying to discard.
Friday arrived with dark clouds threatening rain, appropriate for what I had planned. I dressed carefully in my best outfit, a navy blue dress I'd saved for special occasions, and pearl earrings Howard had given me on our 30th anniversary. As I fastened the pearls, I thought about the day he'd given them to me. We just closed the deal on the Riverside development, our largest project to date. For the woman who prefers her wealth around her neck rather than flashed on her wrist, he'd said with a wink as he fastened the clasp. I prepared a light breakfast, though my stomach was too tense to eat much. At precisely 1 p.m., I called a taxi to take me to Robert's office, but before I could leave, Michael's car pulled into my driveway. "Thought I'd save you the taxi fare," he called cheerfully as he approached the door. Today he was playing the role of dutiful son-in-law, helpful and concerned. "Christine's meeting us there. She had a hair appointment." Of course she did. Appearances were everything to my daughter and her husband. Michael picked up my purse and offered his arm with exaggerated courtesy. "Need help with the steps, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice dripping with fake concern. "I've been managing steps since before you were born, Michael," I replied, taking my purse back from him but ignoring his offered arm. He didn't know I'd been doing an hour of physical therapy exercises every morning for years, keeping my strength and balance far better than most people my age. During the drive downtown, Michael attempted small talk. "Beautiful buildings," he commented as we passed a new development. "They're putting up condos everywhere these days. Great investments." "If you have the capital," I replied non-committally. I gazed out the window, watching the city change as we drove. When Howard and I first started buying property here, downtown was struggling with empty storefronts and neglected buildings. We'd seen potential where others saw decay. Now it was vibrant again, with boutiques, restaurants, and renovated historic buildings. Several of them belonged to Thompson Holdings, though Michael had no idea as he drove past them. Robert's office was in one of the oldest buildings downtown, with polished wood paneling and brass fixtures. His secretary showed us into the conference room, where Robert stood to greet us. "Eleanor," he said warmly, taking my hands, "it's been too long." "Too long indeed," I agreed. "You're looking well." Christine was already seated at the conference table, her hair indeed freshly styled, wearing a cream-colored suit. "Mom," she said, standing to kiss my cheek, "you look nice." I took a seat at the head of the table, a position I noticed irritated Michael slightly. He'd clearly expected to sit there himself. "Shall we wait for the others?" asked Robert. "Others?" Christine questioned. "Who else is coming?" The door opened and 3 people walked in. James Thornfield, CEO of Thornfield Investments, Patricia Miller, my property manager, and Sarah Johnson, my financial advisor. All people who had kept my secrets for years. "What is this?" Michael asked, his confident demeanor slipping. I thought this was a family meeting. "This, Michael," I said calmly, "is the truth about your mother-in-law." Robert distributed folders to everyone. These documents outline Eleanor Thompson's complete financial holdings and business interests. As Christine and Michael opened their folders, I watched their expressions transform from confusion to disbelief. Christine flipped through the pages slowly, her manicured finger tracing the figures as if to confirm they were real. Michael flipped faster, greedily absorbing the information, his eyes widening with each page. This can't be right," Christine stammered, flipping through pages. 32 commercial properties? Residential developments? A shopping mall? "And that's just in this state," James Thornfield added. "Thompson Holdings has significant assets in 4 other states as well." Michael's face had turned ashen. $420 million, he whispered, looking up from the documents. $423 million, to be precise, Sarah corrected, as of this morning's valuation. Christine looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mom, how? All these years living in that little house, driving that old car?" "Wealth that shows is wealth that goes," I quoted Howard. "Your father and I built this fortune together brick by brick. We never saw the need for flash." "But why didn't you tell me?" Christine asked, hurt evident in her voice. "We wanted you to develop your own values, Christine, not to be defined by wealth." Michael was still frantically turning pages. "But where are we seeing this now?" "Because," I said, leaning forward, "I understand you're concerned about my well-being and want to ensure I'm properly cared for. So I thought you should know exactly what you're dealing with." The atmosphere in the room had completely changed. My daughter and son-in-law, who arrived thinking they were about to manage a simple inheritance, now realized they were sitting across from one of the wealthiest business owners in the state. "And this brings us to the changes I'm making to my will," I continued, nodding to Robert. Michael's head snapped up. This was what he had been waiting for, but I knew it wasn't going to be what he expected. What they didn't know was that I had spent decades planning for this very moment, the moment when someone would try to push me aside because they thought I was just a frail old woman with nothing to offer.
The current will, Robert explained, leaves the majority of Eleanor's estate to Christine, with provisions for her grandchildren's education and several charitable foundations. Christine nodded, still looking stunned. Michael's expression had morphed into something calculating, already adjusting to this new reality. "However," Robert continued, "Eleanor has prepared a new document with significant changes." I straightened in my chair. "I've created the Thompson Family Trust. All of my assets, every property, investment, and business interest will be transferred into this trust, effective immediately." "A trust?" Michael interrupted. "Who controls it?" "I do," I said simply, "as the primary trustee until my death, or until I choose to step down. After that, the trust will be managed by a board of 3 trustees. "And those trustees would be?" Michael pressed. "Robert, James, and Patricia. Professional people who understand my wishes and values." Christine's face fell. "Not us?" Her hurt seemed genuine, which gave me a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she wasn't entirely lost to Michael's influence. "You and Michael will be beneficiaries, Christine. You'll receive a monthly stipend from the trust." "A stipend?"
Michael nearly choked. Like an allowance? Exactly like an allowance. A generous one. $10,000 per month, adjusted annually for inflation. I watched as Michael did the mental math. $120,000 a year. Comfortable, but a fraction of what he'd been imagining moments ago. Gone were the visions of mansions and yachts, replaced with the reality of a controlled income stream. But the house, Michael began, referring to my modest home that had suddenly become the least interesting of my assets, remains mine, then becomes trust property, not for sale. What about the rest of it? Christine asked, her voice small. The companies, the properties, they continue operating as they have been, with James and his team managing day-to-day operations. The profits will be reinvested according to the principles your father and I established, with significant portions directed to our charitable foundation. Charitable foundation? Christine echoed. I didn't even know you had a foundation. The Thompson Foundation has been operating quietly for 15 years, primarily focused on affordable housing for seniors, educational opportunities for disadvantaged youth, and community development projects. Michael's facade finally cracked. This is ridiculous. You can't just... I can, and I have, I said firmly. Every document has been properly prepared and filed. You can't possibly manage all this yourself at your age. You nearly burned the house down last week. I smiled. Ah, yes, when I forgot to turn off the stove. A convenient incident, wasn't it? Christine frowned. What do you mean, Mom? I mean, I looked directly at Michael, that I've never forgotten to turn off the stove in my life, just as I've never forgotten to take my medication, pay a bill, or miss an appointment. But these incidents seem to happen when certain people are around to witness them. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. You've been pretending, Christine whispered. Let's call it a test, one that revealed exactly what I needed to know. Michael's face had turned an interesting shade of red. This is absurd. You can't seriously believe we'd... Oak Meadows, the cheapest nursing home in the county. That's where you planned to send me, while you renovated your kitchen and vacationed in Europe, with money from selling my house, of course. Christine gasped. How did you... The porch windows were open, I said simply. I heard everything. What they didn't realize was that I had been watching and listening for years, cataloging every dismissive comment, every whispered conversation, every look that passed between them when they thought I wasn't paying attention. They had underestimated me the last time, and now they were about to learn that this old woman still had plenty of fight left in her.
The drive home was painfully silent. Christine sat beside me in the back seat while Michael drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we arrived at my house, Christine helped me inside while Michael remained in the car, engine running. Mom, Christine said once we were alone in the living room, I need to explain. No explanations needed, I interrupted, settling into my chair. Actions speak for themselves. Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't my idea about Oak Meadows. Michael said, and you went along with it. I finished for her, just like you've gone along with everything else. She looked down at her hands. We didn't know about the money. Would it have made a difference? I asked. If I'd been poor, would I have deserved to be discarded? When she didn't answer, I continued. That's why I never told you about the fortune, Christine. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. A car horn honked outside, Michael's impatient signal. You should go, I said. Your husband is waiting. As she reached the door, I added, Christine, the first stipend will be deposited next week, and I've arranged for a family meeting at the Thompson Building downtown next Thursday at 10 a.m. I'd like you both to attend. After she left, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The revelations of the day had been necessary, but exhausting. For decades, I'd lived a careful double life, the unassuming widow in a modest neighborhood and the shrewd businesswoman who built an empire from the shadows. That night, I called my grandson Jason, who was away at college. "Grandma, how are you?" His cheerful voice warmed my heart. "I'm well, dear. How are your studies?" "Good, but stressful. Finals coming up." "I've been thinking," I said casually, "would you like to come work with me this summer? Learn a bit about business?" "With you?" He sounded confused. "Like at the house?" I smiled to myself. "No, at my office downtown. There's quite a lot I haven't told you, Jason. Quite a lot indeed." As I hung up, I felt a sense of anticipation. The grandchildren would be my legacy now, not Christine and certainly not Michael. They would learn the value of hard work, integrity, and quiet strength. The next morning, a sleek black car arrived to pick me up. The driver, Marcus, had worked for me for 15 years. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. To the office today?" "Yes, Marcus. It's time to step out of the shadows." As we drove downtown, I watched the city buildings grow taller. Among them stood the Thompson Building, 22 stories of glass and steel that Howard and I had built, though few knew we owned it. What my family was about to discover was that the helpless old woman they had dismissed was actually one of the most influential business figures in the city, and I was just getting started. The morning air was brisk as Marcus opened the car door for me. I wore a tailored pantsuit today, not the cardigans and comfortable shoes my family was used to seeing me. My silver hair was styled in a sleek bob rather than the loose bun I typically wore at home. Small changes, but significant ones. This was Eleanor Thompson, CEO, not Eleanor Thompson, vulnerable elderly mother. I entered through the main doors this time, not the private entrance I'd used in the past. It was time to be seen, to reclaim my place in the world I'd helped build. What Michael and Christine didn't realize was that this was just the beginning of my strategy to reshape my family's values before it was too late. The Thompson Building's lobby fell silent as I walked in. For years, I'd entered through a private entrance, but today I wanted to be seen. My sensible shoes clicked on the marble floor as I approached the security desk. "Mrs. Thompson," the guard said, standing immediately, "it's an honor to finally meet you in person." Whispers followed me to the elevator. Most employees had never seen the elderly woman whose name was on their paychecks. I smiled as the doors closed. By lunchtime, the news would be everywhere. My office on the top floor had remained largely untouched since Howard's death. I'd continued making key decisions, but always remotely, through trusted managers. Today, I settled behind the massive oak desk and began reviewing reports. At precisely 9:50 a.m., my assistant announced, "Mrs. Thompson, your daughter and son-in-law have arrived." I took a deep breath. "Send them in." Christine entered first, her eyes widening as she took in the expansive office with its panoramic city views. Michael followed, attempting to mask his shock with a neutral expression. "Please, sit." I gestured to the chairs across from me. "This is unexpected," Christine managed. "Is it?" I asked. "I told you we were meeting at the Thompson Building. We thought you meant a lawyer's office, not this." I smiled. "This building has been in our family for 30 years. Your father designed it himself," I told Christine. "Every detail, from the energy-efficient windows to the rooftop garden." "I had no idea," she whispered. "There's a lot you don't know, but that changes today." I pressed a button, and James Thornfield entered, with several folders. "These are opportunity contracts," I explained as James distributed them.
The Thompson Foundation is launching 3 new initiatives: affordable housing for seniors, renewable energy investments, and education grants for underserved communities. Michael flipped through the papers suspiciously. And what does this have to do with us? I'm offering you both positions, real jobs with the foundation. Christine would oversee the education program, given her background in teaching. Michael, with your sales experience, would work on community outreach. Michael scoffed, and if we decline? Then you decline, I said simply. The stipend continues either way. This isn't punishment, Michael. It's opportunity. Christine looked up from the papers. These salaries, they're generous. They reflect the responsibility, I replied. This work matters. Michael leaned forward. Let me get this straight. After everything, you're offering us jobs? I'm offering you purpose, I corrected. A chance to be part of something meaningful. And what's the catch? He demanded. The catch, Michael, is that you'd have to earn what you receive. No shortcuts, no manipulations, just honest work towards something larger than yourself. Christine touched Michael's arm. We should think about it. Take the weekend, I said, standing to indicate our meeting was over. James will show you out. After they left, I walked to the window, gazing out at the city Howard and I had helped build. We'd always believed wealth carried responsibility. Now I was offering that lesson to my family, a chance to change, to grow. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office I'd avoided for so long, my phone rang. It was Christine. Mom, she said, her voice unsteady, I want to take the position, regardless of what Michael decides. A small victory, but significant. The plan was working. What they didn't realize was that this was just the beginning of my strategy to reshape my family's values before it was too late. I smiled as I hung up the phone. Maybe there was hope for Christine after all. Her father would have been proud of this first step. It was a beginning, though only time would tell if it would be enough to break Michael's influence. As Marcus drove me home, I felt lighter than I had in years. Coming out of the shadows had been liberating in ways I hadn't anticipated. No more pretending to be frail, no more limiting myself to maintain an illusion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, for the first time in 15 years, I felt truly alive again.
3 weeks later, I stood observing from the doorway as Christine led a meeting with the education team. She was a natural, passionate, articulate, commanding respect without demanding it, so different from the passive woman who had let her husband make all their decisions. When the meeting ended, she noticed me. "Mom, how long have you been there?" "Long enough to be impressed," I said truthfully. A smile spread across her face, the first genuine one I'd seen in years. "I never knew I could do something like this." "I did," I replied simply. We walked to my office together. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Michael reluctantly participating in a development meeting. He'd accepted the position after realizing the stipend wouldn't support the lifestyle he envisioned. "How are things at home?" I asked carefully. Christine sighed. "Different. Michael's angry. Says you manipulated us." "And what do you think?" She considered this. "I think I've spent too many years not thinking for myself." "Progress, indeed." That evening, my grandson Jason arrived from college, eager to begin his summer internship. Over dinner at my house, the same modest home I'd lived in for decades, he peppered me with questions. "Grandma, why did you keep all this secret, even from Mom?" I set down my fork. "Your grandfather and I came from nothing, Jason. We saw how money changed people, how it created entitlement rather than gratitude. We wanted our daughter to have values that couldn't be bought." "And did it work?" he asked innocently. I thought of Christine finding her voice in the boardroom. It's complicated, but it's never too late to learn.
Later that week, I received a visit I'd been expecting. Michael arrived at my office unannounced, his expression stormy. "We need to talk," he demanded. I gestured to the chair. "I'm listening." "This charade has gone on long enough. You've made your point. You're not helpless. You're not going to any nursing home. Now, let's discuss a reasonable settlement so Christine and I can move on with our lives." I studied him. "Settlement?" "A lump sum," he clarified, "instead of this monthly allowance humiliation. A fair portion of what Christine would have inherited anyway." "I see." I leaned back. "And what would you do with this settlement?" He shrugged. "We have plans, investments of our own." "Like the tech startup that lost $80,000 of your savings last year? Or the timeshare scheme before that?" His face reddened. "You've been spying on us?" "I've been protecting my daughter," I corrected, "just as I am now." I stood and walked to the window. "There will be no settlement, Michael, no lump sum. You'll continue receiving the stipend, and if you choose to, you'll continue working here." "You can't control everyone forever," he snapped. "You're still just an old woman. Time is not on your side." I turned to face him. "That's where you're wrong. I've arranged everything precisely because I understand time's value. Every contingency, every possibility, it's all accounted for. Christine won't stand for this forever. She'll fight the trust, the will, everything." I smiled sadly. "You still don't understand what this is about, do you? This isn't punishment. It's protection. For Christine, for the grandchildren, even for you, though you can't see it." As he stormed out, I felt a heaviness in my chest. Some lessons couldn't be taught, only learned through time and consequence. And I was prepared to be patient. What Michael didn't realize was that I'd recognized his type the moment Christine brought him home. I'd seen the same calculating ambition in business competitors for decades. The difference was those men had underestimated me only once. Michael was making the same mistake repeatedly. That night, I reviewed the financial reports Jason had prepared as part of his internship. He had his grandfather's head for numbers and my eye for detail. The boy had potential, a natural understanding of business that Christine had never shown. Perhaps I had made mistakes with my daughter, protecting her too much from the reality of our wealth. With Jason, I would take a different approach. He would learn everything, not just about the money, but about the responsibility that came with it. The trust would ensure the family legacy continued according to Howard and Mai's values, but Jason might be the one to truly carry that legacy forward. Time would tell.
Summer turned to fall, and the changes in my family became more pronounced. Christine thrived in her role at the foundation, developing innovative programs that received national attention. She'd moved into a small apartment of her own. Temporarily, she said, though we both knew better. Michael rarely spoke to me directly now, communicating through terse emails when necessary. He performed his job adequately, but without enthusiasm, counting days until what? He still didn't understand there was no end game where he suddenly received millions. My grandson Jason had returned to college transformed by his summer experience. "Grandma," he told me before leaving, "I want to major in urban planning now. I want to build things that last, like you and Grandpa did." On a crisp October morning, Robert visited my office with concerning news. "Eleanor," he said gravely, "we've discovered something you should know. Michael has been meeting with Stanley Green." I frowned. Stanley was a ruthless attorney known for challenging trusts and wills. "He's looking for loopholes." Robert nodded. "They've been researching ways to challenge your competency. Medical evaluations, cognitive tests.
They're building a case. Though I'd anticipated this possibility, the reality still stung. Let them try, I said firmly. I've undergone complete physical and psychological evaluations every 6 months for the past 10 years, all documented. That's not all, Robert continued. He's been contacting your business associates, suggesting you're being manipulated by your advisors. I laughed dryly. Anyone who knows me would find that absurd. Indeed, Robert agreed. No one's taking him seriously, but it shows he's desperate. That evening, I invited Christine to dinner, alone. We sat in my dining room, the same table where we'd had family meals for decades. I know what Michael's doing, I said after we'd eaten, with Stanley Green. She closed her eyes briefly. I told him not to. I'm sorry, Mom. Are you part of it? I asked directly. No, she said firmly. I've told him I won't challenge you in court, won't put us all through that. I reached for her hand. You've changed. The foundation changed me. For the first time, I'm doing something that matters, something that's mine. I'm proud of you, I told her, meaning it deeply. She squeezed my hand, then asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. What will you do about Michael? I considered carefully. Nothing, for now. He'll make his move, and it will fail. The question is, what will you do? Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know. 15 years of marriage, but I don't recognize him anymore. Or maybe I'm finally seeing clearly. I nodded. Clarity often comes when we least expect it. 2 days later, I received an official letter requesting a competency hearing. Michael was making his move, just as I'd predicted. But what he didn't know was that I'd spent decades outmaneuvering men who underestimated me. This would be no different. I called Robert immediately. You've seen the filing? Yes. It's aggressive, but expected. I've already contacted your medical team. And Christine? Has she been served? Yes. She called me immediately. She wants you to know she's not part of this. I believe her. Schedule a meeting with Judge Wilson if possible. She's fair and has little patience for frivolous claims. As I hung up, I looked at Howard's photograph on my desk. Well, dear, I said aloud, it seems our son-in-law is forcing a confrontation. I wish you were here for this one. The next few weeks were a flurry of preparations. Medical evaluations, financial reviews, affidavits from business associates who'd worked with me for decades. Michael's challenge would fail, but I was leaving nothing to chance. What Michael failed to understand was that my greatest asset wasn't my fortune. It was my patience. I had waited decades to build an empire from the shadows. I could certainly wait out one greedy son-in-law. The courtroom was quieter than I expected as I took my seat beside Robert. Across the aisle, Michael sat with Stanley Green, both in expensive suits, wearing expressions of grave concern. Christine was notably absent. Judge Harriet Wilson, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed the papers before her. This is a competency hearing for Eleanor Thompson, petitioned by Michael Carter. She looked up. Mr. Green, you may begin. Stanley stood. Your Honor, this is a difficult but necessary proceeding. Mrs. Thompson is a 78-year-old widow who, until recently, lived a modest private life. Suddenly, she's making radical changes to long-established estate plans, creating elaborate trust structures, and inserting herself into business matters despite no formal business education. I suppressed a smile at this last claim. We believe these actions suggest cognitive decline, possibly early-stage dementia, making her vulnerable to undue influence from advisors who stand to benefit from these changes. Judge Wilson nodded. And your evidence? We have documentation of concerning behaviors, forgetting to turn off appliances, missing appointments, confusion about dates and times. Additionally, the drastic nature of her financial decisions itself suggests impaired judgment. As Stanley continued, the courtroom door opened quietly. Christine slipped in, sitting in the back row. Our eyes met briefly. When Stanley finished, Robert stood. Your Honor, these allegations are not only false but demonstrably so. We have comprehensive medical evaluations conducted by independent specialists every 6 months for the past decade. He submitted the records, then continued. As for Mrs. Thompson's business acumen, I'd like to submit Exhibit B, her complete educational and professional history. The judge reviewed the documents, her eyebrows rising. Harvard Business School, class of 1965. Co-founder of Thompson Holdings? 37 patents? Stanley looked stunned. This clearly wasn't in his research. Furthermore, Robert continued, the concerning behaviors Mr. Green mentioned were isolated incidents, most witnessed only by the petitioner himself, and contradicted by Mrs. Thompson's regular cognitive assessments. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Thompson, would you like to address the court? I stood slowly, my cane in hand. Your Honor, I've spent most of my life being underestimated. When my husband and I started our company, bankers wouldn't speak to me directly. They addressed all questions to Howard, though we were equal partners. We learned to use their prejudice to our advantage. I glanced at Michael. Throughout my career, I've encountered many men who mistake a careful, quiet approach for weakness or incapacity. Mr. Carter is merely the latest. Judge Wilson studied me. About these incidents of forgetfulness? Fabricated or exaggerated, I stated firmly, though I did allow Mr. Carter to believe his observations were accurate. Sometimes, Your Honor, it's useful to let people underestimate you. It reveals their true intentions. The hearing continued with testimony from my doctors, business associates, and financial advisors. By mid-afternoon, the pattern was clear. Judge Wilson finally spoke. I've heard enough. This petition is denied. Mrs. Thompson is clearly competent to manage her affairs. Furthermore, she added, looking sternly at Michael, I find this petition was filed frivolously and in bad faith. Mr. Carter will pay all court costs and Mrs. Thompson's legal fees. As we left the courtroom, Christine approached. Mom, I'm so sorry about all this. Don't be, I said. Some things need to come to light before they can be resolved. Michael stormed past us without a word, Stanley trailing behind. What now? Christine asked quietly. Now, I replied, we rebuild what matters. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Word had leaked about the wealthy widow fighting her son-in-law's attempt to declare her incompetent. I hadn't sought publicity, but perhaps it was time to step fully into the light. Mrs. Thompson, can you comment on today's ruling? A young reporter called. I paused, considering. Today's hearing wasn't just about me. It was about respect for elders, about recognizing that age doesn't diminish capability or wisdom. I've spent decades building businesses that create jobs and support communities. That work continues, regardless of personal challenges. The soundbite would make the evening news, my first public acknowledgement of my role in Thompson Holdings. After decades in the shadows, it felt strange and liberating. What Michael never understood was that this was never about money or control. It was about legacy, about ensuring that what Howard and I had built would continue to reflect our values long after I was gone. And sometimes protecting that legacy meant standing your ground, even against family.
1 year later, I stood at the podium in the Thompson Building's Grand Hall, surveying the gathered crowd. The Thompson Foundation was celebrating its first anniversary, and the successes were remarkable.
12 affordable senior living communities under construction, a renewable energy initiative powering 3 neighborhoods, and education grants that had helped over 500 students. Christine stood nearby, confident in her role as education director. Jason was home from college for the event, proudly showing his roommate around. Even my younger grandchildren had roles, handing out programs with serious expressions. Michael was noticeably absent. After the failed court case, his relationship with Christine had deteriorated rapidly. Their divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. He'd kept the house and his monthly stipend continued. I wasn't vindictive, but his connection to the foundation had ended. "Welcome, everyone," I began. "A year ago, we launched this foundation with a simple principle: wealth carries responsibility. Today, we see the fruits of that belief." As I spoke about our accomplishments and future plans, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what Howard and I had always intended, our fortune being used purposefully, guided by our values. After the speeches and applause, the reception began. I found a quiet corner to rest my legs when Christine approached with a tall, distinguished man. "Mom, this is Dr. Harrison Peters from the Community Health Initiative. He's interested in partnering with us." I shook his hand, noting the warmth in his eyes when he looked at Christine. Interesting. Later, as the event wound down, Christine and I stood on the rooftop garden Howard had designed decades ago. "I never thanked you properly," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For the wake-up call. For believing I could be more than Michael's wife." I smiled. "You always were more. You just needed to remember it." She leaned against the railing. "I've been thinking about something you said, about why you and Dad lived so modestly despite their success. 'Wealth that shows is wealth that goes,'" I quoted. "Yes, but it's more than that, isn't it? It was about values, about not letting money define you." I nodded, proud of her understanding. "Exactly. I want the kids to understand that too," she continued. "That's why I've decided not to contest any of your arrangements, the trust, the stipends. It's all wise. I see that now." Below us, the city lights twinkled in the evening darkness. Howard would have loved this moment. "You know," I said, "when your father and I started out, people called us dreamers, said our ideas about ethical business and long-term planning were naive." "They were wrong," Christine said. "They were." I agreed. "And so was I. About some things." She looked surprised. "Like what?" "I thought I needed to hide my success to protect you from entitlement. Instead, I should have brought you into our vision earlier, taught you directly, rather than shielding you." Christine considered this. "Maybe, but I got there eventually." "You did," I agreed proudly. As we prepared to leave, Jason joined us. "Grandma, Dr. Peters wanted to know if you'd consider joining the hospital board. He says they need someone with your strategic thinking." I laughed. "At my age? I think not." Christine smiled. "Why not? Age is just a number, right? Isn't that what you've been proving all along?" I considered this, remembering the courtroom. Michael's failed attempt to declare me incompetent based solely on my years. "Perhaps you're right," I conceded. After all, the most dangerous thing a 78-year-old woman can do is trust no one. But the most powerful thing a 79-year-old woman can do is trust the right people. As we walked toward the elevator, I felt a profound sense of peace. The empire Howard and I had built would continue, guided by the values we'd always cherished. My daughter had found her strength, my grandchildren were learning the right lessons, and I had finally stepped fully into the light. What began as a painful revelation of betrayal had transformed into something beautiful, a family legacy stronger than mere wealth. built on principles that would endure long after I was gone. In the end, the greatest fortune wasn't measured in dollars or properties, but in the values that would guide generations to come. And that was a wealth that would never diminish. 2 years after the courtroom showdown, my life had settled into a new rhythm. I spent 3 days a week at the office, mentoring Jason and overseeing major decisions for Thompson Holdings. 2 days were dedicated to the foundation, working alongside Christine. Weekends were reserved for family. Sunday dinners with Christine, Jason when he was home from college, and my younger grandchildren, Emily and Thomas. On a warm spring morning, I was reviewing property acquisition proposals in my home office when the doorbell rang. To my surprise, Michael stood on my porch, looking thinner and more subdued than I remembered. "Eleanor," he said with a nod, "may I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Tea?" "Please." We sat in my kitchen, the same modest space where he had once plotted to send me to Oak Meadows. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "You're looking well," he offered. "Business must be good." "It is," I replied, pouring the tea. "What brings you here, Michael?" He stared into his cup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened, about the kind of man I became." I remained silent, waiting. He continued, "I wanted to apologize, not for the ambition. I still believe in ambition, but for trying to take shortcuts, for treating you as an obstacle rather than a person." I studied him carefully. "What prompted this revelation?" "I met someone," he admitted. "Someone who reminds me of you, actually. Straightforward, principled. She wouldn't give me the time of day when she learned about the competency hearing, said it showed my true character." I couldn't help but smile. "Smart woman." "She is." He paused. "She made me realize I've been chasing the wrong things. Success without ethics isn't really success." "That's something Howard used to say," I noted. Michael nodded. "I've been offered a position with a development company in Seattle. Clean slate, fresh start. Before I go, I wanted to make amends. With you, with Christine if she'll see me." "I'm not the one you hurt most," I replied. "I know." He looked up. "Did I ever have a chance with the business if I'd been different?" I considered this. Howard and I built Thompson Holdings on principles, Michael. If you'd shared those principles, who knows? But you saw wealth as the goal, not the means. As he prepared to leave, I found myself saying, "The monthly stipend will continue. I made a commitment." He shook his head. "I don't want it anymore. Donate it to the foundation. I need to build something of my own." After he left, I sat quietly processing the unexpected visit. People could change. I'd seen it with Christine. Whether Michael's transformation was genuine or temporary, only time would tell. That evening, I called Christine and told her about Michael's visit. "He called me too," she said. "Asked to meet for coffee. Will you go?" She sighed. "I think so. Not for reconciliation, but for closure. Dr. Peters proposed last weekend, Mom. I said yes." "That's wonderful news," I said, genuinely happy for her. Harrison Peters was everything Michael wasn't. Kind, ethical, supportive of Christine's career. "You know what's funny?" Christine mused. "If you hadn't exposed everything 2 years ago, I'd still be trapped in a marriage to someone who saw me as a means to an end. Sometimes the hardest wake-up calls are the most necessary." That night, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. Howard's words from his letter echoed in my mind. "Money is just a tool. Use it wisely." We had built an empire together, But its true value wasn't in the balance sheets or property deeds. It was in the lives it touched, the communities it strengthened, the values it perpetuated. Michael's visit had brought an unexpected sense of completion. The confrontation I'd initiated 2 years ago had set off a chain of events that transformed not just my family, but perhaps even Michael himself. If nothing else, it had shown that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to reclaim your power, to reshape your legacy. At nearly 80 years old, I had more energy and purpose than many people half my age. I was no longer the secret millionaire hiding in plain sight, nor was I the helpless old woman my son-in-law had tried to discard. I was simply Eleanor Thompson, businesswoman, mother, grandmother, mentor. And I had never felt more alive.
5 years after that fateful meeting in Robert's office, I celebrated my 83rd birthday surrounded by family and close colleagues. Christine and Harrison were there with their 1-year-old daughter, my newest grandchild, named Eleanor after me, Ellie for short. Jason had graduated with honors and was now working full-time at Thompson Holdings, showing a natural talent for the business. Even Michael sent a card from Seattle, where he'd apparently found both professional success and personal happiness. The celebration was held at the Thompson Community Center, a new facility built by our foundation in one of the city's formerly neglected neighborhoods. It provided everything from after-school programs for children to job training for adults to social activities for seniors. It embodied everything Howard and I had believed in, that wealth should serve community, that business could be both profitable and purposeful. As I looked around at the gathering, I felt Howard's presence strongly. "We did it, my love," I whispered. "Our legacy is secure." The next morning, I had a scheduled meeting with my medical team. At 83, I remained remarkably healthy, but I was realistic about the future. Dr. Martinez reviewed my latest tests with her usual thoroughness. "Mrs. Thompson, you continue to impress us," she said with a smile. "Your numbers are better than many of my 60-year-old patients. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." "Purpose is a powerful medicine, doctor," I replied, having reasons to get up in the morning. After the appointment, I met with James and Robert, my trusted inner circle. It was time to discuss the next phase of my plan. I want to step back gradually, not retire completely, but reduce my direct involvement over the next 2 years. Jason is ready to take on more responsibility. Christine has found her place with the foundation. It's time to prepare for the transition. Robert nodded. "We've been expecting this conversation. The succession plans are already in the trust documents." "I know," I said. "But plans on paper are different from reality. I want to be here to guide the transition, to address any issues that arise. Howard didn't have that luxury, but I do." "A gradual transition makes sense," James agreed. "Jason has tremendous potential, but he still has much to learn." "From all of you," I emphasized. "Each of you has knowledge and experience that must be passed on." We spent the afternoon outlining the transition plan, which responsibilities I would hand over immediately, which would follow later, and which I would retain until the end. It was a bittersweet discussion, but necessary. That evening, I sat in my garden watching the sunset. Howard had planted this garden decades ago, and I'd maintained it meticulously since his death. The roses were in bloom, their fragrance filling the air. I thought about the journey of the past 5 years, from the moment I overheard Michael and Christine plotting to send me to Oak Meadows to today's succession planning meeting. What had begun as a defensive move to protect myself had evolved into something far more significant, a reclaiming of my power, a reaffirmation of my values, a reshaping of my family's future. The modest house I still lived in remained a choice, not a necessity.
I could have moved to a penthouse or a mansion years ago, but this home held memories of Howard, of raising Christine, of Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. It remained the heart of our family, even as that family evolved and grew. The phone rang, interrupting my reflections. It was Jason. "Grandma, I just heard from the Madison Avenue project. They accepted our proposal, with all the affordable housing units intact." I smiled. The Madison Avenue development had been contentious, with city officials pushing for luxury condos only. Jason had fought hard for a mixed-income approach, arguing that diverse communities were stronger communities, exactly what Howard and I had always believed. "That's wonderful news, Jason. Your grandfather would be so proud." "It was your strategy that made the difference," he said. "That meeting where you reminded the zoning board about the tax incentives, you were brilliant." "We make a good team," I replied, touched by his generosity. After we hung up, I watched the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the horizon. Howard and I had built our empire slowly, methodically, guided by principles that many considered old-fashioned: fair dealing, long-term thinking, community investment. In a world obsessed with quick profits and flashy displays, we had chosen substance over show, impact over image. It hadn't always been easy. There had been setbacks, mistakes, moments of doubt. But we had persevered, believing that what we were building mattered not just for ourselves, but for the generations that would follow. 5 years ago, when Michael had tried to discard me as a useless old woman, he had unwittingly set in motion events that would strengthen rather than diminish our legacy. Christine had found her voice and purpose. Jason had discovered his calling. Even Michael himself had been forced to reconsider his values. And I had stepped out of the shadows, reclaiming my rightful place as not just Howard's widow, but as a business leader in my own right, a woman of substance and vision. At 83, I was still making a difference, still shaping the future. The most dangerous thing a 78-year-old woman can do is trust no one, but the most powerful thing an 83-year-old woman can do is trust in her own legacy, knowing that what she built will continue long after she is gone, and that was a victory greater than any revenge could ever be.